So to really just emphasize the idea behind databases and models and how those all work, we're going to be replacing the SQLite 3 database in our project with Postgres. And the first question might be, well, why is that? Well, in a small little local environment, our SQLite 3 database is going to do just fine. Like, it's really going to handle the job, no worries there. But as projects get bigger and bigger and more complex and more data is being saved into your database, you need to have something more robust like a Postgres. And that's the most popular database. As I said before, there's lots of other databases, but essentially at some point your project is going to want to move over there. So you might as well start there so that you don't have to have the pain of trying to do a huge migration. And it's really not too much to set up. So let's go ahead and open up a new tab. Just go ahead and search for Postgres. I believe the URL is postgres.org. postgresql.org, but Google can take you there as well. But basically, we just want to go ahead and get this installed on our computer. So we want to run this database locally here. When we upload our project to a server, we're going to have to do that there. But go ahead and see what it looks like for your individual operating system. So if you go over to the download page here, there's going to be all sorts of options here, right? Like Linux, Mac OS, Windows. But the one that I really prefer if you're on a Mac is if you go to Mac OS, go ahead and click on this. There's a couple of different versions here, but it's this Postgres.app. This is a really visually user-friendly sort of operation here. So I recommend going ahead and going with this one. So we'll go ahead and get that download started here. And it's got a nice little guide here to see everything that you need to do to get this up and running if you have any sort of situational problems. And there's going to be guides for the other ways too. So if you're on Linux, you're on Windows, don't worry, you're going to have documentation there as well. But the basic idea is that you've just got to get Postgres up and running on your computer. So let's go and wait a second for this download to finish. For my Windows users, I'd just like to walk through the download process with you. So go ahead and hit the same download button. You're going to want to make sure that you move over to Windows and then choose the download the installer. So this will go ahead and fire up the download. I guess you'll have to actually go ahead and choose your version here first. Most Windows machines are running on the 64 platform, so just go ahead and pick that download. If you know that you're on a 32-bit system, go ahead and choose one of those. The version doesn't necessarily matter. There hasn't been massive changes through Postgres, but you can see it starts this download for us. I've already installed this, so I'm just going to go ahead and cancel this. But just go ahead and follow all the steps through the installation. Leave everything as default. When it asks for a password, just make sure you remember your password. You'll see as we go through the videos that I'll actually show you how to change the password to whatever you want later, but make sure you can remember the password that you used during installation. Then to get to the same point as me in the video, where in the terminal you can be working and accessing the Postgres terminal, just go ahead and go to your start menu here. You're going to want to scroll down until you can find Postgres. You can see there's a couple different versions I installed here, but hopefully you have the 11 version. Again, earlier versions are fine, but just go ahead and pick that. And then you want to go down to the SQL shell. If you go ahead and just click on this, it opens up a shell with your environment here. And so just go ahead and hit enter for localhost. That means it's your own server here. Which database do you want to work with? For the initial one, just go ahead and hit enter for the Postgres. Now for the port, and again, during installation, it's going to ask you about that. It should be 5432. I previously had installed Postgres here on this Windows computer, and so the only one that was open was 5433. I guess there was a lot of other open ones, but I just chose one that was closed. So just do whatever it recommends here. If you end up not doing 5432, like me here, if I have 5433, just make sure that in your settings and stuff that you put the appropriate port. And then see, you can do the same username, Postgres, whatever, and then have the same whatever password you used during installation. Go ahead and enter that, and then it will take you to this point, which this is the exact same thing that you'll see in the videos. So there you have it. Just wanted to give you a quick walkthrough so you can get on the same page. Now for Linux users, there's lots of different distributions out there. And so ultimately, I would recommend going to Google and just searching how to install Postgres on your specific Linux distribution. If you're using Ubuntu, these are the 3 steps essentially that you need. You could go get something a little more in-depth if you'd like, but regardless of your distribution, your goal is to get to that shell where you can start entering in Postgres commands like you saw with Windows, and you're going to see here in a second with Mac. So if you need any help, reach out in the Q&A, but this should be enough for you to move forward. All right, so my download finished, and I went ahead and opened up the installer, and it brought me here. So I'm going to add Postgres to my applications. We'll go ahead and give that a second to move over. Now again, if you're on Windows or Linux, go ahead and just follow any sort of setup guide it has there on the Postgres website. You basically just need to get into the Postgres command line, and that's where we're going to move forward and create our databases and stuff. So if you have any issues, please leave it as a comment to this video. I'm here to help you and get you to that next step, but the guides here are really good, so you should be all right. All right, with that installed in applications, I'm going to go ahead and open up Postgres. Looks like maybe because I just installed it, it's not showing up automatically. But let me go ahead and find that. There it is, Postgres. And we'll open this up. So the basic idea here, Postgres is its own database that's living by itself, and it's going to run as a little mini server that can be connected to over a certain port number, and then our application over here is going to communicate back and forth with it through that port number. So we've got to get Postgres set up here, and then we can connect it with our project. So sort of step by step, we're going to get this thing up and running. And when you get to a really big scale, like huge websites, they'll have a completely separate server that just runs the database, and then you've got the other server that's running like your Django app. Like the bigger and bigger things get, it gets more complicated, but we're going to keep it fairly simple here. So with this, we want to go ahead and initialize, start a new Postgres sort of session here, get it onto our computer. So we're going to hit initialize, and you can see it's already created a few databases for me here. But if you want to go ahead and connect with Postgres, it should be up in your top menu, and you can click on it, and you can say preferences here. And yes, let's check automatically to go get updates for that. But you want to have this probably checked, this automatically start Postgres on login, because that basically says, hey, whenever somebody logs in here, you have that database ready so that when you're working on your project, you'll know that database is ready for you. But it could be a little bit of a strain on your system, so if you don't want that, feel free to go ahead and uncheck that. But and I think it's good to open it up with terminal. That's what we should want. So I'll go ahead and X out of the preferences there. Let's go ahead and look at one of these databases that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on Postgres here. And you'll see it opens up a little terminal page here, but if you have this Postgres equal to hash, even if you're on Windows or Linux, this is what you should have. And so what you want to do here is go ahead and type a backslash and then a DU. This is going to show you all the users that are inside of your computer that are working. So there's one that's just my name on the computer right now. That's the Zappy code. And then there's Postgres here as well. But what we want to do is we want to use this Postgres one. And so we need to go ahead and set a password for this. Now, in order to set a password, we're going to go ahead and do a backslash, and then we're going to say password. And we want one for the account of Postgres. So it's going to ask for a new password here. By default, it's blank. So it's asking for a new one. Again, you'd want a really good, strong password here, but just for development, I want to keep this thing easy. So I'm going to say Django 1.2.3.4, hit enter on that, and then Django 1.2.3.4. Okay. So now that we've done that, we have access to this Postgres user account. The next thing that we want to do is we want to create a database. So to do this, we're going to, and basically this is a database for our Django project. So every time you have a new project, you want to have a database for it. And a database holds inside of it lots of tables that represent the model. So for example, our jobs, our blog, it's all going to go inside of this one database. You have one database per project. So in all caps, we want to type out create space database, and then we're just going to give our database a name. So I'm going to call this maybe like portfolio DB, and then you have to end it with a semicolon and hit enter. Okay, so after you're done that, it will go ahead and create a database for you, and really that's all we need. Like, we can actually go ahead and close out of Postgres here. I'm going to terminate that tab. Now that that is up and running, we have a database that we need. We essentially just need to connect our project to this Postgres database. So let's go ahead and open up Atom here. It's in our settings file where we can set this up. So here you can see this database option, and this is where we'd want to put our information. Now there's quite a few lines here, so sort of follow along with me as we're doing this. But the first thing that we want to do is we want to change this engine. So right now it's telling us that we are going to be using an SQLite 3 database, right? And that was this little sort of dinky one that it made for us, but now we want to upgrade to Postgres. So we're still going to have that Django.db.backends, but instead of SQLite 3, we are going to change that to PostgreSQL. Excellent. Make sure you have that all spelled correctly. We know that's big issue with me. The next one is the name. So go ahead and delete what we have right now and instead replace it with a string of whatever it is that you just named your database. So in our case, we called it Django DB or Portfolio DB. So we're going to say Portfolio DB. Just like that. And if you ever need to figure out, oh, I forgot what the name of it was, you can always go back to Postgres and check out your databases there. But put that name in there. Next, we want to add a user. So put user in all caps in a string, then a colon, then another string. Make sure you always have a comma after you put in each option here. But this is the username, which is just Postgres. Okay. Again, as your project gets bigger and bigger, you're going to want to make a different user than just the Postgres user with certain permissions and all that, but we can just leave that for now. We want to set the password, remember all caps, colon, and let's put our password into this string. So for us, that was Django 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And then next, we want to say where it is that we can find this database. So we're going to say all caps host, colon, and then specify where it's going to be. Now it's going to be running on our own machine. So this is where you could do like the 127.0.0.1, or I like to do it as just all lowercase local host. Okay. Now the last thing that we need to do is set up what port it's going to be running on. And if you go ahead and open up Postgres here, server settings, it should be showing you, yes, it's on port 5432. So I kind of wanted to show you where this came from so you don't think I'm just pulling this random number out of anywhere, but that's what we're looking for, this 4532. And look at that, we've got our portfolio database here up and running, so that's pretty cool to see that. But again, that was 4532. Let me just confirm, yes, 4532. So we're going to say here port, and then we are going to say colon 4532. Excellent. Okay, so now that we have all of this in place, this is essentially telling our Django project when you are creating a database, when you are updating a database, look to this location rather than the SQLite 3 database that we had before. So I'm going to save this file. I'm going to go ahead. You can see we're having all sorts of issues here already, but I'm going to close running the server, and I'm going to do my Python manage.py run server. The first thing that you'll see is we're going to have to install something here, and that's this air loading G2. Basically, this is a pip module that will allow us to work with Postgres inside of our project. So what we need to do is just copy this name, G2. I'm sure that's not how the people developing that wanted me to say it, but make sure you're still in your virtual environment. We're just going to do pip install and then paste that name. Okay, that's going to go through and do its thing. Great. So now let's try running the server one more time. You'll notice we do get a little bit of a weird error here, and that's it's saying that there's a new version coming out and you might have some issues. So it's saying you should do this pip install scicog2-binary. If you see this message or not, it will depend on when you're watching this and what happens with this project in the future. But if you're the same like me, you'll just want to, you can still live like that, but you're going to want to do Control-C to get out first, but just install that via pip so that we can get rid of that warning sign. We should probably follow that before things break and we wonder, hey, what the heck happened there? So let's go ahead and start running that server one more time. And you'll notice now that we do this, it tells us, hey, you have 17 unapplied migrations. And you might be saying, well, we already did the migrations, like what's happening here? Well, that was when we had the db.sqlite 3. In fact, if we switched our project to, instead of looking to Postgres, but instead this db.sqlite 3 file, everything would be working. We wouldn't have to have any migrations. And in fact, that job that we created earlier, we would actually have access to it. You'll notice now, if while this server is running, let me make sure it's up. Let's go to our site /admin. Okay, we'll come over here. We get all sorts of errors because it says, hey, you haven't done any migrations. I can't work with this new database. And so we're going to close out of here. Remember, the way to migrate is just say python manage.py migrate. We don't have to make any migrations because we haven't added anything new. Like there's already in our code these migrations that we've created. So we're just going to say migrate, and boom, this is where it does all of our stuff. And now that we have this in place, let's run the server, and we'll come back to our site and go to our /admin. And you'll notice here, let's say, I try and put in my same information. So Nick, Django 1.2.3.4, it's going to say, hey, that doesn't work. And you're like, what? I made that super user. Well, the super user that you create lives inside of the database. So when you move to a different database, like our SQLite 3 over to Postgres, we have to create a new super user. So we're saying, okay, we're going to Control-C this, and then we're going to do our python manage.py create super user, just like that. For the name, I'm going to put Nick again. Email, not essential, but thought I'd put it there. If you ever need anything, that's me, nick@zappycode.com. Password, I'll do my classic testing one here, Django 1.2.3.4, and boom, we are finished there. All right, so now that we have that in place, let's run the server one more time. Let's reload this page. Oops, let's reopen the admin. Now I'm going to do user Nick, Django 1.2.3.4, enter, boom. Now we're here, this is awesome, but you'll notice if I try and go to jobs, for instance, there's nothing. And that's because we were looking at a completely separate database. And just for kind of kicks and giggles here, if you really want to see, we can pull back the other situation if we move back to the other database. So let's go to our settings file, and I'm just going to undo until we get back to what we had before. Oops, too far. Oops, and there we go. All right, so there we go. All right, so we're at a good position. Let's go ahead and reload the page here. I'm gonna have to sign back in, Nick, Django 1.2.3.4, and look, there comes the job object back, right? So anyways, I just want to kind of nail this concept that whenever you have a separate database, like in the database is going to live all your model objects, all your users, authentication stuff, like it's all there. And you need to apply migrations anytime you have like a new database. Now, again, you shouldn't be moving databases all the time. Typically what I see is people start a project and, maybe they're just so itching ready to get forward. They just use the default SQLite 3. And then once they're ready to push their project up, maybe then they'll move to Postgres. But I would recommend, if you can from the start, just go ahead and start with Postgres and then move forward from there. But let's go ahead and get back to what we had before. So we'll just go ahead and watch all this hard work that we've done come back into the foreground, save that, and then we'll reload our page here. Have to relog in. Excellent. Now, one thing that I do want to mention here that's kind of a little bit scary almost is that when you move from one database to the other, not only do you lose the data inside of that database, but for example, if we go to our project, we still have this image inside of our media folder. So in fact, if we go ahead and copy the name of this, I'll do rename just so that I can copy this path. All right, so if we go to our localhost /media, we said that was our media URL, and then we paste in that images stuff. You'll see this image still appears even though there's no entry in the database necessarily connected with this. So you got to kind of be careful when you're moving from place to place, but hopefully that helps your understanding a little bit more. Now, just to really cement that we've got a good grasp on this, in the next lecture, we're going to be adding one more model to our project, and that's going to be for our blog. So we'll go ahead and do that in the next lecture.